The day I was set to come clean about who I really was to my girlfriend, I caught her chatting away in French with her bestie. Her friend threw out, "If you marry Daniel, what about Noah?" She shot back, "Even though I'm going to marry Daniel, Noah will always be the one I love." They both cracked up, thinking I was just some clueless dude who couldn't grasp French. Little did they realize, I was the heir to the wealthiest family in City A and could speak several languages fluently. My act as a broke, ordinary guy was just a test to live a different life. I told my parents, "Mom, Dad, I've made up my mind. I'm ready to go back and take over the family business." They were super excited, but then they remembered I'd been keeping something from my girlfriend. They couldn't help but ask, "Is your girlfriend coming with you? You haven't told her the truth yet, have you?" I replied, "No, she's not coming. I'm breaking up with her." Mentioning Sophie made my voice drop a bit. "I'll wrap everything up here within a week." After a few more words, I hung up, stashed my phone away, and headed back to the private room. It was loud and crowded, but the chatter paused when I walked in. Acting like I hadn't noticed, I went straight to Sophie and sat down beside her. She looked up from her convo, giving me a curious look. "Noah, what kind of call takes so long?" she asked before I could respond. Another voice cut in, speaking in French. "Sophie, when are you and Daniel getting married?" Hearing this, I clenched my glass until my knuckles turned white. Sophie, however, stayed cool. She glanced at me and answered in French, "The date my family picked, half a month from now." Everyone in the room turned to stare at me. One of her friends raised an eyebrow, curious. "If you're marrying Daniel, what about Noah?" "Breaking up?" Sophie shook her head and said, "No." She swirled her wine, took a sip, and added, "Marriage is just to please my family. Noah is the only one I truly love." Her words got everyone laughing. The jokes flew around quickly, with someone saying, "Sophie, are you for real? Loving someone so beneath your status?" Sophie looked at me with eyes full of tenderness, like her silence said it all. Another voice chimed in, teasing, "You must be really into him. But hey, does he even get French?" It was meant as a joke, and everyone laughed. "Noah's family is struggling. Where'd he get the money to learn another language?" "Relax, he definitely doesn't understand." Their mockery filled the room, not knowing I actually caught every word. After all, I wasn't the broke nobody they thought I was. I was the only heir to the richest family around. Sophie and I had been together for 5 years. She treated me well, except she never introduced me to her family. I figured she was worried about our different statuses. The Christopher family was one of the top in City B. I had planned to reveal the truth that I was the sole heir to a massive fortune, hiding my identity to escape living under my parents' shadow. But fate had other ideas. 3 days ago, I found a red wedding invitation in her study. The groom was the Ito family heir, and the bride was Sophie. While she was sweet-talking me, she had already agreed to an arranged marriage. She called me her husband one moment and was ready to marry someone chosen by her family the next. In that instant, I knew there was nothing left to say. She was getting married. I would inherit my legacy. We both had bright futures, but apart. As the evening wound down and everyone got ready to leave, I trailed behind the group, quiet. Just as I stepped out, a stranger's voice called out from behind me. I froze and turned around, seeing a former business partner who always wanted to collaborate with my dad. I sighed inwardly, not wanting to show who I really was. I was thinking about how to brush it off when one of Sophie's friends gave me a once-over and let out a mocking laugh. "Young Master Noah, with those clothes? Do you think he's wearing anything worth over $300 altogether? What a joke." Her words sparked a burst of laughter. They weren't speaking French, so I heard every mocking word, but stayed unfazed. Instead, Sophie got angry, giving the person a cold, warning look. The woman hesitated, feeling embarrassed, and everyone else quickly fell silent after getting the same look. With the laughter dying down, the person didn't follow us. I stayed behind Sophie as we headed home. Once home, she took off her coat and hung it up before breaking the silence. "I won't bring you to these kinds of gatherings anymore," she said. I kept my tone and expression calm. Even though she was essentially cutting me out of her social circle, I didn't react. I just asked, "Do you think I embarrassed you?" She chuckled lightly and tried to snuggle into my arms, teasing me. But I sidestepped her, forcing her to explain with a hint of helplessness. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I just don't want you to get hurt," I replied. "But there's a gap between our statuses. Situations like this will keep happening. Hasn't your family pushed you into an arranged marriage?" I looked at her, searching for a hint of guilt. Even when talking about the arranged marriage, Sophie's expression only froze for a moment before going back to normal. "Noah, you just need to know that I love you. I'll handle the rest," she said. If I hadn't been watching closely, I wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. After she spoke, Sophie went to the bathroom to freshen up. Watching her leave, I stayed silent, my thoughts racing. Was her so-called solution to marry someone her family approved of while keeping me on the side? From the bedside table, a notification pinged. It was Sophie's phone. Her password was never a secret, so I unlocked it easily and saw a message from Daniel. He wrote, "Sophie, we're meeting both families tomorrow. If you don't stay over tonight, won't the elders suspect our marriage is fake? I know you love your boyfriend, but at least for these few days, could you give me some dignity?" Though his words were meek, his intent was clear. He started using their parents as an excuse to make her stay. What would he do next? He'd just keep escalating step by step, but I didn't care anymore. I'd already decided to leave. With that in mind, I marked the message as unread and put the phone back. Soon after, Sophie came out of the bathroom, grabbed her phone, and glanced at it. The next second, she looked at me apologetically. "Noah, there's something urgent at work I need to handle. I won't be home tonight. Get some rest." "Okay." She rushed out, too distracted to notice my lack of response, or that I didn't protest like before. Instead of sending her off while grumbling about wanting more time together, I watched her walk away in silence. Not long after she left, my phone pinged with a new message. "Sophie will come to me with just a word. Tomorrow we're meeting the parents. Once we're married, what will you be? Just a hidden lover?" Daniel's words hurt, but what pissed me off most was that Sophie had given him the knife he used to hurt me. Maybe she didn't realize, but even if I hadn't found the wedding invite, her plans to marry someone else wouldn't have stayed hidden. The day after I discovered the invite, Daniel added me as a friend. Since then, he'd been sending me taunting messages. Photos of Sophie helping Daniel try on wedding outfits, picking rings, visiting the wedding venue. One picture after another destroyed any leftover love I had for Sophie. That night, Sophie didn't come home, and I didn't care. The next morning, after a quick wash, I went straight to my office and resigned. By lunchtime, it was finalized. During my break, I had lunch with some colleagues downstairs. When I mentioned quitting, one who was close to me joked, "Lately I've been seeing videos of people quitting to inherit family businesses. Noah, did you quit suddenly because you're going to inherit a family fortune too?" I nodded slightly and said, "That's right. I'm going to take over the family business." They froze for a moment before bursting into laughter, thinking I was joking. I smiled but didn't add anything. After lunch, I packed my stuff into a box and went straight home. When I arrived, Sophie was there. Seeing me with the box, she asked curiously, "Did you quit?" I nodded and carried the box to the bedroom. Her brows furrowed tightly as she called out, "You love that job. Why did you suddenly quit?" I paused, looked at her, and smiled. "Because I found something I want to do even more." Hearing my response, Sophie didn't ask anything else. She just said, "If the work is too tiring, just come back. Seeing you work so hard every day breaks my heart. Noah, we have enough money in our family to support both of us." I shook my head firmly and replied, "I'm not a freeloader." Sophie was taken aback. "How could you ever be?" I cut her off, not wanting to hear more. "Why are you home so early today? Didn't go to work?" she asked. "Work's been so busy lately that I haven't had time to spend with you. I wanted to make time for us today," she explained. Her frown softened, and she quickly became the sweet, caring girlfriend I'd always known. "What do you want to do? Shall we have dinner or watch a movie?" In the past, such words would have moved me deeply. I knew she was the heir to the Christopher Corporation, always juggling tons of work. Her willingness to make time once showed how important I was to her. But now, as I looked at her, I couldn't help but wonder, was she really busy with work, or was it the wedding prep that kept her occupied? How could she plan a wedding with another guy while still claiming I was the only one she loved? In the end, I didn't expose her lies. There were only a few days left. Soon I'd disappear from her life entirely. I shook my head to decline her suggestion and thought for a moment before saying, "How about helping me with some spring cleaning? There's a lot of old stuff in the villa we don't need anymore." Sophie agreed, and we spent hours sorting through items. By the end, the things I had set aside for disposal were all things we'd once bought together as a couple. From mugs to accessories, clothes to slippers, everything was tossed into the trash without hesitation. As the pile of discarded couples' items grew, the smile on her face began to fade. By the time I threw the last item away, her unease was clear. "Noah, did you find out something?" she asked nervously. "What could I know? Is there something you're hiding from me?" I raised an eyebrow, dodging her question with one of my own. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. After a moment of silence, she grabbed my hand tightly. "Noah, no matter what happens, just remember, I love you." I gave a faint smile, but said nothing more. After finishing the cleaning, Sophie insisted on going out for a date, worried she might sense something was wrong. I didn't refuse. We had dinner, watched a movie, and then headed to an auction house. Just as we were about to enter, a man in a sharp suit approached us. Sophie's expression flickered for a split second, and I noticed right away. "What's wrong? Did you run into someone you know?" I asked. Before she could answer, the men stopped in front of us, greeting us warmly. Sophie quickly introduced him. "This is Daniel, the son of a family friend." Then, after a brief pause, she introduced me. "And this is my boyfriend, Noah." The stark difference in her introductions made Daniel's smile falter, though he quickly recovered and extended a hand toward me. "I've heard a lot about you, Sophie's boyfriend. It's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said before I could respond. The group of friends who had mocked me in French the day before appeared, winking at Sophie behind my back. It hit me then that this coincidence was planned. They'd brought Daniel here on purpose. Anger boiled inside me, but I knew losing my cool now would just make things worse. I had to keep my cool. At the auction, Daniel's seat was right next to Sophie's. Unlike his taunting texts, in person he was charming and knowledgeable. When he found out Sophie was into porcelain, he started chatting her up about it. Sophie, who had been distant at first, gradually leaned closer to him. It wasn't until I coughed that Sophie seemed to remember I was there. She turned to me softly. "Are you bored, Noah? I know you're not into this stuff. If there's anything you like, just bid for it." Before I could reply, the hushed whispers of her friends behind me reached my ears. "Sophie sure knows how to save face for Noah. Even if he's interested, what does it matter? He probably doesn't even know how to place a bid." "Ha, exactly. This must be his first high society auction." The women kept their mocking chatter going, occasionally glancing my way. Even though they pretended to whisper, it felt like they were loud enough for me to hear. I didn't react, but soon enough, they were standing before me, addressing me as Young Master Thompson. As the previous item was sold, the next piece was a jade sculpture of longevity, cranes, and pine trees. The jade quality was top-notch, and the auctioneer introduced it as a work by the renowned Chan, the grandmaster of jade sculpting. Daniel got excited, raising his paddle and turning to Sophie. "This piece is invaluable. Sophie, your grandmother's birthday is coming up. This would be the perfect gift for her." Hearing the name Chan, I glanced at the sculpture. One look was enough to tell me everything I needed. My voice stayed calm as I said, "It's Daniel." Daniel turned to me, disbelief on his face. He wanted to snap back and call me a clueless bumpkin, but with Sophie beside him, he forced a smile. "And how, Mr. Thompson? did you come to that conclusion? Because the real one was gifted to his grandmother by the Thompson family heir, I said plainly. There's only one such sculpture in the world. The genuine piece is in my family's collection, making the one on stage definitely fake. Though I meant to stop him from making a mistake, my words had the opposite effect. Daniel burst into laughter, and Sophie's friends joined in, ridiculing me openly. Noah, stop pretending to know what you're talking about. It's embarrassing, one sneered. Right, so the real piece was gifted by the Thompson family heir. What? Did you crawl under their table and see it yourself? Just because your last name is Thompson doesn't mean you're related to them. Their jeering grew louder, only stopping when Sophie shot them a cold look. She turned to me, holding my hand as she spoke gently. Noah, I know you've been reading books on art appraisal lately, but expertise doesn't come from books alone. Daniel grew up attending auctions and has a deep understanding of jade carving. Naturally, he knows more than you. Her tone was measured, but her words carried the same disbelief as the others. I chuckled softly, but said nothing. In the end, Daniel bid an exorbitant 100 million won to secure the jade sculpture. As he swiped his card, I couldn't help but smile. I wondered how Sophie's grandmother would react when she found out her family spent 100 million on a fake sculpture. I didn't stop him or worry about it further. Rising from my seat, I excused myself to the restroom. As I washed my hands, a familiar voice sounded behind me. Noah, I thought I made myself clear. Yet here you are, shamelessly clinging on. Do you really want to be the third wheel that badly? The voice was sharp and grating, nothing like the composed Daniel from earlier. I looked up and turned to face him. Mr. Ito, let's get one thing straight. I've been with her for 5 years. If anyone's the third wheel here, it's definitely not me. With that, I prepared to leave, but he stepped forward, blocking my path with a cold sneer. Yes, 5 years, he mocked, and yet she still won't marry you. Haven't you ever wondered why? I'm the heir to the Ito family, and she's the heir to the Christopher Corporation. We're a perfect match. But you, a gambler dad, a sick mom, a broken-down family with nothing to offer. What makes you think you're worthy of her? I froze for a moment. That backstory was something I'd made up, but it surprised me that Sophie had shared it with Daniel. I chuckled bitterly, imagining that if my situation was as pitiful as I'd pretended, Sophie would have handed him another weapon to hurt me. You're right, I said with a faint smile. You're the perfect match. I wish you both the best. With those words, I walked away. Moments later, my phone rang. It was my mom. Noah, you need to hurry back. Everyone's waiting for you, and we've prepared so many gifts for your return. Your father and I bought you a castle overseas. Your aunt got you a diamond watch once worn by a British king. And your uncle, he filled an entire garage with luxury cars for you. Listening to her rave about the family's extravagant plans, I couldn't help but shake my head. Mom, I'm coming back to inherit the family business, not to bankrupt it. Just as I finished speaking, a familiar voice sounded from behind me. What family inheritance? I froze for a moment, instinctively ending the call. I wondered why so many people loved sneaking up behind others to talk unexpectedly. Turning around, I saw Sophie's less than pleasant expression. After a brief pause, I explained. It's nothing. My old colleagues asked what I'd do after resigning, so I joked about going home to inherit the family business. Sophie frowned slightly. I wasn't someone who usually joked about such things. She seemed to sense something was off and was about to speak when I stepped forward, calling back to her. Coming, there are still a few jewelry pieces left to showcase. Hearing this, Sophie thought I was interested in buying antiques, so she nodded and followed me back to the auction. Once seated, Sophie bid on several high-value antiques. After winning, she had them packed and handed them to me. I looked at the boxes in my hands and said softly, I don't need these things. Sophie hugged me with a smile. You'll get used to it. Don't worry about wasting money. I'll buy you treasures for the rest of our lives. I opened my mouth, but didn't say what I wanted. I didn't need these cheap trinkets. My collection was priceless. As the auction ended and people started leaving, Sophie and I, along with others, got ready to head out. Everyone had driven separately, so we could have just gone our separate ways. But as soon as Sophie and I got into the car, Daniel appeared, tapping on the passenger side window. The window rolled down, and he no longer had the sharp, mocking tone he'd used in the restroom earlier. "Sophie, my car broke down. Could you give me a ride home?" he asked with a smile. Sophie frowned, about to say no, when Daniel quickly added, "Your parents did ask me to look after you and spend more time with you, didn't they? You haven't forgotten, have you?" Sophie's expression darkened slightly. After a moment's hesitation, she reluctantly agreed. Daniel's smile widened, and he pushed further. "But I get carsick and can't sit in the back. What should we do?" Sophie glanced at me, about to speak, but I had already opened the door and moved to the back seat. My smooth move left her momentarily stunned. By the time she reacted, I was already seated in the back. I closed my eyes, as if preparing to rest. Sophie's words got stuck in her throat, making her visibly uncomfortable. She wanted to say it was just a seat and not worth fussing over, but as she looked at me in the rearview mirror, I had already shut my eyes. Daniel climbed into the passenger seat, closing the door with a triumphant smile. In his mind, he thought, "Noah, even if she likes you now, so what? Everything I want will eventually be mine, including her heart. It's only a matter of time." Feeling smug, his tone was unusually soft as he said, "Mr. Thompson seems tired. Let him rest for a while." Maybe sensing my mood, Sophie didn't talk much with Daniel. She nodded silently and started the car. At some point, I genuinely fell asleep. When I woke up, the car was parked in the Christopher family's garage and Daniel was nowhere to be seen. Sophie touched my face gently. "You're awake. You seem to be sleeping so soundly. I didn't want to disturb you." Still groggy, I nodded and opened the car door, stepping out without waiting for her. I walked straight toward the house. Sophie quickly got out and caught up with me at the door, blocking my path. "Are you upset? Daniel really is just a family friend's son. Don't overthink it," she said. I gave a nonchalant hum, pretending to still be angry. Sophie grabbed my hand, her tone soft. "He really is just a family friend. Darling, you know you're the only one I love." She seemed to remember it had been a while since we'd been intimate. Just as she leaned in to kiss me, I pushed her away. Her shocked expression stayed with me as I entered the house. "I'm not feeling well. I'll rest in the bedroom," I said, locking the door behind me to make sure she couldn't follow. The next morning, we sat in the dining room having breakfast. My phone buzzed with a reminder alarm I'd set long ago. The note read, "Meeting the parents." Sophie saw the message too. It was part of my original plan to reveal my true identity. I'd suggested she meet my parents, and she'd agreed. Our eyes met, and I was thinking about how to cancel the meeting when her phone rang. It was Daniel. Whatever he said made her expression shift slightly. She turned to me with an apologetic look. "Noah, something urgent came up. Can we reschedule meeting your parents for another time?" I thought Sophie might expect me to be upset, but I simply nodded calmly and said, "That works. I have something to take care of today as well." After she left, I headed out too. I went to a mall and bought gifts for the friends I was meeting later. When we met up, everyone unwrapped their boxes, and the sight of brand new luxury items inside made them gasp in astonishment. "Noah, where did you get these? They're so authentic." "They are authentic," I replied with a laugh, amused by their disbelief. As they marveled over the gifts, I decided it was time to come clean. The truth is, my backstory about having a gambling father and a sick mother was fake. My real identity is that of the sole heir to the wealthiest family. I'm here today to say goodbye because I'm heading home to take over the family business. Their reactions were a mix of shock, amazement, and eventually pure excitement. They erupted in cheers, calling me young master with such fervor it felt like the ceiling might lift off the restaurant. Amidst the celebration, someone brought up Sophie. "But what about Sophie? Does she know your true identity?" The mention of her made my smile fade slightly. "She's planning to marry someone else," I said. "What? No way!" My friends were incredulous. Sophie, the girl we all thought was the epitome of loyalty and devotion. Exactly. 3 years ago, when you mentioned liking the night blooming Sirius, she bought out every specimen worldwide just to make you smile. 2 years ago, when you had the flu, she canceled billion-dollar deals to fly back and personally take care of you, staying up all night. And then there was last year's car accident. The truck was heading straight for you, and she swerved the car to shield you, breaking 3 ribs in the process. She spent 3 months in the hospital, nearly losing her life. How could her groom not be you? Hearing them recount those moments made me feel nostalgic. Back then, Sophie's love for me was all-encompassing, even to the point of self-sacrifice. But now I shook my head and smiled faintly. She does love me, but her family thinks I'm beneath her. They're forcing her into marriage. Before I could reveal the truth, the invitations were already printed. From what I could tell, her plan was to make me her lover after the wedding. My friends exploded with outrage. A lover? Are you kidding me? Making the sole heir to the wealthiest family a lover? The Christopher family must be insane. She'll regret this. Just wait until she's chasing after him, begging for forgiveness. Another chimed in. Exactly. Once they learn who you are and realize you left quietly, they'll lose their minds. At that moment, Sophie and Daniel walked through the door, overhearing the end of our conversation. Sophie frowned and asked, "What do you mean by true identity?" Seeing them approach, one of my friends, filled with indignation, was about to speak when I stopped him. I turned to face the pair, my expression cold. "What are you doing here?" Sophie's gaze flickered with unease as she avoided eye contact. "Our families have a collaboration, so we arranged to meet and discuss it," she said, her voice uncertain. Her answer made me laugh softly. Of course I knew the collaboration she was referring to. It was their marriage arrangement. Because of their business discussion, Sophie and Daniel didn't join us. Instead, they sat at a nearby table, close enough for me to see every intimate gesture exchanged between them. I watched as he cut her steak, shared his favorite dishes with her, handed her napkins, and even wiped a smudge from her lips. Their interaction was so natural and familiar that my friends were fuming with anger, but I stayed calm, my expression impassive. After finishing the meal, we all parted ways, and Sophie suggested we head home with Daniel, perhaps learning from the last time we argued over the front seat. This time, Sophie decided to take the family's extended Rolls-Royce, with the chauffeur driving, so she didn't have to sit in the front passenger seat again. The car smoothly headed toward the Ito family's house, the journey uneventful with the road ahead clear. No one expected an accident to happen at that moment. A runaway truck came hurtling toward us from another direction. The driver instinctively swerved the steering wheel, but the sound of a loud crash followed as the two vehicles collided. The windows shattered, and I was thrown to the opposite side due to the force. Just before I lost consciousness, I saw Sophie protect Daniel beside her, shielding him from harm and soothing his panic. My vision blurred, and I suddenly remembered the car accident my friends had mentioned earlier. It was during our 4th year together, when my feelings for her were still at their peak. At that very intersection, a truck sped toward us, just like this one. I was in the truck's path. In a moment of fear, Sophie realized she couldn't avoid the collision. She swerved the car, forcing her side to face the truck. The front of the car was crushed in, and she was pinned in the driver's seat. Firefighters and doctors worked tirelessly to rescue her, and it took hours to get her out. She nearly died that day, but when she woke up from the danger, the first thing she asked was about my safety. Now, in the same kind of accident, the difference was that she instinctively shielded Daniel, not me. The rear of the extended Rolls-Royce was completely mangled, and after everyone got out of the car, Sophie, still calming Daniel, finally noticed me. I was silently holding my bleeding forehead, but luckily my injury wasn't severe. After some treatment at the hospital, the doctor advised me to stay for observation for 2 days because of my head injury. Sophie, seeing the bandages on my head, looked at me with deep guilt. "Noah, I'm so sorry. I was just thinking about the upcoming collaboration with Daniel, and he couldn't get hurt. I only thought about protecting him. You can hit me, shout at me, whatever you want. Just don't ignore me." "Okay." Her apology was sincere, and her reasoning seemed understandable if I hadn't remembered their wedding, which was just a few weeks away. I didn't respond. I didn't say I forgave her or that I wouldn't. My expression stayed emotionless throughout. Sophie kept apologizing, repeating how sorry she was. Suddenly, her eyes brightened with hope, and she said, "Your birthday is coming up in a few days. Can I give you your gift in advance? What do you want for your birthday? I'll get it for you." Hearing this, I finally looked up at her, my eyes still emotionless. "Then get me a plane ticket to City A 3 days from now," she asked. "City A? What for?" She seemed surprised, but quickly answered her own question. "Do you want to travel there?" I didn't explain. I just nodded and murmured, "Mmm." Sophie didn't ask more questions. She opened her phone and bought the plane ticket to City A right in front of me. Afterward, she said, "I have something to do during this time, so I won't be able to accompany you. You go to City A, and when I'm free, I'll join you. The plane ticket is a small gift, but I'll make it up to you with a big surprise later." I shook my head and smiled softly. "It's not small at all. After all, this plane ticket was my way home. Sophie, thank you for your gift. You're personally sending me home." During my 2 days in the hospital, Sophie seemed to go back to being the attentive and loving girlfriend she was when we first started dating. But this illusion ended the moment I was discharged. She claimed she had work to attend to and arranged for the driver to take me home. Not long after, I got a taunting message from Daniel. "Sorry, Sophie and I are about to get married. She's accompanying me to my family's estate for dinner today, so I'm afraid she doesn't have time to pick you up." I ignored the message and quietly went home to start packing my luggage. On the day of my departure, I woke up early. 7 hours before my flight, I began carrying my suitcases out the door. Just as I was finishing, Sophie returned. Seeing the pile of suitcases at the entrance, her face immediately showed a flicker of panic. "What's going on?" she asked. "I told you I was going to City A, didn't I? You even bought the ticket for me." "Did you forget?" I replied, my expression calm, as if I were just planning a vacation. But my explanation didn't convince her. She asked, "Wasn't it just for a day or two? Do you really need this much luggage?" I curled my lips into a faint smile and said, "I brought extra clothes. I want to take more pictures this time." She knew I'd never cared much for photos before. Even when we traveled together, I never brought this much. Her unease grew, spreading through her like wildfire. She looked like she wanted to open my suitcases right then and there to check if I was telling the truth. But just as she moved to do so, her phone rang, cutting through the tension. It was Daniel. Whatever he said on the other end made her pause momentarily. Then, without another word, she left. Before she did, she turned back to me and said, "Noah, don't stay too long. Send me your return flight details and I'll pick you up." I didn't answer because I knew I wasn't coming back. This departure was our final goodbye. 5 hours before my flight, I changed the villa's door code. From my birthday, I reset it to Daniel's. I left a sticky note on the door that read, "Since this will soon be Mr. Ito's home, it's only fitting the code should be set to his birthday." 3 hours before my flight, I gathered every photo of Sophie and me from the villa. I burned them one by one in the fire pit. I remembered the kisses we shared beneath fireworks, the countless times I told her she was mine, confessing my love under starlit skies, and swearing to love her forever. She once took the brunt of a car accident to protect me, breaking 3 ribs and spending 3 months in the hospital, nearly losing her life. Her social media was filled with pictures of us walking through spring, summer, autumn, and winter together. Now, as the memories turned to ashes, it was all over. 2 hours before my flight, my phone buzzed. Daniel had sent me a video. In the video, a family gathering was happening. Sophie's friends, Daniel's brothers, and their parents were all there. The camera focused on Sophie and Daniel as the crowd cheered. "Kiss, kiss," someone teased. "Come on, Sophie, you're getting married in a few days." "What's there to be shy about?" Daniel said. His cheeks flushed. He closed his eyes and leaned toward her. The cheers grew louder as everyone encouraged Sophie to kiss him. Sophie hesitated, staring at him for a long moment before finally closing her eyes. She wrapped her arms around his neck and stood on the tiptoe. The video ended, and another message from Daniel followed. "See that? I'm the husband the Christopher family has chosen for her. With your pathetic family background, you're no match for the Christopher family. You'd be lucky to marry a beggar, let alone Sophie. Even if Sophie loves you, her defenses are crumbling. First she met my family, then she moved in with me, and just now she kissed me. Tell me, how much longer before she's in my bed?" I didn't reply. Instead, I printed every mocking message he'd sent me over the past few days. I stacked them neatly in the empty living room. 1 hour before my flight, I added one final message to the top of the stack. "Sophie, congratulations on your wedding. We're done." Then I dragged my suitcases out of the villa, hailed a cab, and sped toward the airport. "Sophie, from this moment on, I will return to being the heir of the wealthiest family. You and I are done." At the airport in City A, I stepped out dragging my suitcase. A sleek Bugatti, clearly worth a fortune, was already waiting outside. As soon as I approached, a man standing by the car opened the door for me and said, "Young master, please get in." As my luggage was loaded into the car, I settled into my seat and naturally began chatting with the man in the driver's seat. "Martin, why are you here to pick me up? Where's the family driver?" Martin chuckled. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes added a touch of warmth to his expression. The car smoothly merged into traffic as he replied, "It's been years since you've been back, young master. When I heard you were returning today, I volunteered to take the job myself." I smiled and teased, "Looks like you missed me, Martin." With a light laugh, I shifted the topic. "How have my parents been all these years?" Martin, who had served as the Thompson family's butler for decades and practically raised me, felt more like family than an employee. Our relationship was never distant. He didn't deny my playful remark, instead nodding with a smile. "I did miss you. Master and Madam are doing well. They're healthy and happy, though they've missed you terribly. That's about all there is." We chatted along the way, and by the time the car pulled up in front of the Thompson family villa, I had a good idea of how things had been at home during my absence. I stepped out of the car and headed straight to the villa. The moment I opened the door, a row of servants stationed by the entrance greeted me in unison. "Welcome home, young master." I couldn't help but rub my forehead in mild exasperation. Martin, pushing my suitcase behind me, he handed it off to the servants, who promptly carried it upstairs. Noticing my expression, Martin chuckled and said, "Master and Madam are sticklers for ceremony. When they heard you were coming back, they trained the staff overnight to prepare this welcome. They're all waiting for you in the living room now." I nodded, finding the whole ordeal a bit over the top, but refrained from saying anything that might dampen the mood. Instead, I made my way directly to the living room. As expected, it was packed with people, my parents, aunts, and uncles, all gathered in one place. I greeted everyone individually before sitting beside my parents. Their concerned expressions pierced through my usual composure, stirring an unexpected wave of emotion within me. A sense of frustration welled up, hard to put into words. I'd been pampered by my family all my life, never having to face any hardship. That was until I decided to hide my identity and move to City B for personal growth. There I met Sophie. During our 5 years together, I gave her my whole heart, truly believing we'd spend our lives together. I was so sure we'd be each other's one and only, but in the end, I nearly became her secret lover without even realizing it. My devotion had been for nothing. Noticing my mood, my mother placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "What's done is done. The past is the past. The one thing our family doesn't fear is making mistakes. When things fall apart, we start over. We're never short on second chances." Her reassurance eased my frustration. The others, noticing the shift, quickly changed the subject, bringing out the gifts they'd prepared for me. I soon realized my mother's earlier phone call had been anything but exaggerated. It had actually been understated. Property deeds, keys, and other gifts filled the table. At the center was a stunning diamond watch crafted from gold and adorned with massive glittering diamonds. Every detail exuded luxury and value, yet they still seemed unsatisfied, intent on covering every inch of the table with gifts. Just as I was about to tell them it was unnecessary, my aunt clapped her hands on the table, her eyes lighting up as she exclaimed, "Noah just got out of a relationship, didn't he?" Perfect timing. I have a friend whose daughter recently returned from abroad. My friend's been fretting about her not dating. Why don't you two meet? It could be just as friends at first. I was momentarily stunned and quickly waved my hands, declining my aunt's suggestion. But she ignored my refusal and handed me a contact on her phone. "She's a lovely girl. I met her before she went abroad. She's stunning. Even if there's no romantic connection, she'd make a great friend," my aunt insisted. Unable to turn down her enthusiastic proposal, I eventually agreed. What I didn't expect was that when I opened the contacts she shared, I realized I was already friends with this person on my phone. I tapped into her profile, a simple black moon icon against a dark background and a minimal nickname consisting of just 2 letters. Puzzled, I tried to recall how and when I'd added her as a contact, but nothing came to mind. I didn't ask. Quietly, I turned off my phone screen, deciding that whatever answers I sought would come naturally when we met. While I was preparing for this meeting, Sophie finally returned home. It was already dark, and the villa was cloaked in shadows. The lights were off, and Sophie didn't notice the note stuck to the door. She entered her usual password and pushed the door, only to find it wouldn't open. Confused, she looked up and noticed the note for the first time. Written on it were the words, "Since this will soon be Mr. Ito's home, it's only fitting the code should be set to his birthday. Ito's home, Daniel." Her heart skipped a beat, a growing unease spreading through her chest. Could Noah have found out? But how? She and Daniel had only met once, and no one else would have told him about the engagement. Where could he have learned that she was planning to marry Daniel? Hesitant, she entered Daniel's birthday as the code. The door unlocked immediately. Turning on the lights, she saw the villa was empty. Instinctively, she called out, "Noah?" Her voice echoed through the house, but no reply came. Then she remembered that Noah had gone to City A 2 days ago. He rarely left her for long. Most of the time, he was at home, waiting for her to return. Ever since they moved in together, this was the first time he hadn't been home when she came back. A sinking feeling weighed on her chest. Could he really be serious about leaving? But then she dismissed the thought. "That's impossible," she told herself. "Noah loved me so much. He was probably just upset that I hadn't spent much time with him lately. Maybe he'd guessed something about me and Daniel and was sulking. But he would eventually come back. I would apologize, and everything would be fine." Determined, she bit her lip and walked toward the living room. She decided she'd call Noah later to ask when he'd return so they could talk things through. But as she reached the living room, her eyes fell on a stack of papers sitting on the table. Her steps quickened, and she sat on the couch, picking up the papers with curiosity. In her heart, she hoped they were from Noah, a note or something left for her. "See, he's just being dramatic," she thought. "He wouldn't really leave me." A faint smile tugged at her lips, but froze as she read the handwritten note on top of the stack. It was unmistakably Noah's handwriting, beautiful and precise, almost artistic, but the words felt like a hammer striking her chest. "Sophie, congratulations on your wedding. We're done." Her ears buzzed and her mind went blank. She read the note again and again, hoping she had misunderstood. But no, the words didn't change. "He's leaving me. No, that's impossible." Desperation took hold of her. She ripped the note from the stack, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it away. But this action revealed the second page, a printed screenshot of a conversation. Sophie froze as she recognized the profile picture and nickname of the sender. It was Daniel. The first message was sent 2 weeks ago. "So, you're the lover Sophie keeps hidden. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Daniel, her fiancé. You'd better know your place and leave. When Sophie and I are married, it'll be embarrassing for you to be kicked out of the villa. Whenever I call, Sophie comes to me. Tomorrow, we're meeting each other's parents. Once we're married, what will you be? Just a secret lover. She loves you. So what? She already kissed me. How much longer until she's in my bed together? Interspersed among the messages were photos and videos. Sophie and Daniel trying on wedding outfits, choosing rings, visiting the wedding venue. One video had been paused at the most damning frame. Daniel leaning in to kiss Sophie as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Sophie's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her heart sinking deeper with every word and image. Noah knew everything. It was the image of her and Daniel, surrounded by their families and friends, locked in a kiss as if it were the ultimate declaration of love. The fragile thread in Sophie's mind snapped, and a wave of silent panic washed over her. Her face turned pale, and she mumbled, "I don't believe it," over and over. She stumbled toward the staircase, her legs weak and trembling. As she climbed the stairs, her foot slipped, and with a thud, she tumbled down the steps. The sharp pain brought her back to reality. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed the handrail and pulled herself up, hobbling toward the bedroom. This time she moved slower, and no further accidents happened. She made her way to the bedroom and stopped short as she opened the door. The room was barren. Everything belonging to Noah was gone. Even the photo frames on the nightstands, once holding pictures of the two of them, were empty. The frames sat in their usual spots, but the photos had vanished. Sophie's eyes filled with panic as realization dawned. She yanked open the closet, then the drawers. After pulling out her belongings, she saw only empty spaces where his things once were. She searched every corner of the villa, the bedroom, bathroom, study, everywhere. Not a single trace of Noah remained. Her mind flashed back to when Noah suggested they do a spring cleaning, casually discarding every couple's item they owned. Now she understood why he had done it. He was cutting ties, erasing every trace of their time together. The void inside her became more oppressive, almost suffocating her. She couldn't wrap her head around it. 5 years together, and now he was gone. After everything they had been through, he left her so heartlessly, taking only his own stuff. Her initial shock turned into panic. She had to track him down to find out why he left. Before she realized it, she was back in the living room. Her hands shook as she dialed his number, the long beep tones echoing in her ears. The phone rang endlessly before he finally answered. It was late, and his voice sounded groggy, like he had just been yanked out of sleep. He didn't even glance at the caller ID and groggily asked, "Who is this?" "Noah, it's me, Sophie," she replied, her voice shaky, worried he might think it was a prank and hang up. She quickly added, "Where are you? I need to see you. Where are our photos?" The sound of her voice immediately woke Noah up. He looked at his phone and saw her name flashing on the screen. Letting out a deep breath, he realized his mistake. "I forgot to block her number." In the brief silence, Sophie kept calling his name over and over, her persistence getting on his nerves. "Sophie," he said curtly, "you're about to get married. Some boundaries need to be respected. As for the photos, I burned them. When Mr. Ito moves into the villa, I doubt he'll be cool with seeing that stuff. Meeting up is even more pointless. You're about to marry someone else, so why'd you want Sophie see your ex?" Hearing that he had burned the photos, Sophie felt her heart break. But it wasn't just the photos she lost. It was the finality in his rejection that hurt the most. "Noah, I didn't agree to break up," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "It's not what you think with Daniel. The only person I love is you. How could you just leave me like this?" Her voice wavered, and he could hear her faint crying. He paused. Sophie rarely cried. In their 5 years together, he'd only heard her cry once after the car accident. Even though she was the one badly hurt, she had cried uncontrollably seeing his injuries. Her usually composed self had completely fallen apart. This was the second time, and he never doubted the love Sophie once had for him. In reality, witnessing the depth of her love made him notice when it started to fade. She might still care about him, but he wasn't the only one she loved anymore. That's why, when faced with choices, he was the first to be let go. Whether it was her secretly thinking about making him her lover or instinctively saving Daniel during the car accident. He was no longer her priority. So even though he heard her sobs and felt her sadness, his heart stayed cold. "Sophie," he said evenly, "we broke up. Breaking up doesn't need both people to agree. If anyone left this relationship, it was you. You gave up on us first. How can you accuse me of abandoning you now? Let me be clear. We're done. Don't contact me again." Each word hit Sophie like a dagger. She tried to speak, her eyes full of sorrow. "Noah," she barely managed before the call cut off. The sound of the call ending left her stunned. When she tried calling him back, her calls wouldn't go through. He had blocked her. Sophie tried other ways to reach him, but every message bounced back with a red exclamation mark. Defeated, she collapsed onto the couch, her eyes drifting to the pile of papers on the table. Staring at the stack, her sadness and anger boiled over. She swept the papers off the table with a hard swipe, sending them flying through the air. Pages fluttered down onto the table, the couch, and the floor with a rustling sound. "Daniel, it's all Daniel's fault. If he hadn't messed things up, Noah wouldn't have left so suddenly." The last page landed in front of her, showing the final message Daniel had sent to Noah. "So what if he loves you? You've already kissed me. How much longer until we're together?" Sophie's eyes darkened as she read those words, her gaze heavy and unwavering. After a long moment, she let out a cold laugh. Her lifeless eyes flashed with a sudden, fierce glint. "Daniel," she muttered to herself, "I told you long ago that the only person I'd ever love is Noah. How dare you chase after him? Since you're so eager to get married, why not give you a wedding gift?" Unaware of Sophie's thoughts, he calmly blocked her number and every other way she could reach him. Once done, he set his phone aside and drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. That night, he slept better than he had in a long time. The next day was his first day at Thompson Group, and he woke up early. Confident in his ability to make his mark, he was determined to avoid giving anyone a reason to criticize him, especially on day one. Thompson Group was a family business with over a century of history, spanning industries like fashion, luxury jewelry, fragrances, cosmetics, skincare, and even household goods. Not only did the company have a presence in these fields, but it also led them. Initially, he had planned to start with one of the smaller brands and work his way up. However, his parents insisted he was capable of handling more and directly appointed him as CEO. By the time he officially took the role, word had spread about a young, dashing CEO jumping into Thompson Group, making headlines in the industry. While he was stepping into this new chapter, Sophie was drowning her sorrows at the biggest club in City B with her friends. Even though they knew he had broken up with Sophie after finding out about her engagement to Daniel, none of them took it seriously. One of her friends sneered. "He's just salty about being pushed aside. Breaking up was probably a rash move. Didn't he quit his job recently? Don't worry, Sophie. Once he runs out of cash, he'll come crawling back. Who else is going to clean up after his gambling dad and sick mom?" Exactly. Another chimed in. "Guys like him. So Phoebe gold diggers dreaming of marrying up. Always act like this when reality hits. Give it some time, and he'll be begging." Right. Did he really think he could be your husband? He should be thankful for the life he's had with you. All those luxuries he never even dreamed of before. The mocking comments about him kept going, their voices annoying and nonstop. Even Sophie, who had been quietly drinking, found it unbearable. Her face darkened, and suddenly, she smashed her glass against the table. The sharp sound of breaking glass and scattered shards silenced the room. In the sudden quiet, Sophie's icy voice cut through. "Have you said enough?" Her friends stared at her, stunned into silence. No one could figure out what triggered her anger. It wasn't the first time they talked trash about him like this, often even in her presence. And Sophie had never defended him before. So why now? Maria, sitting closest to Sophie, was the first to break the silence. She frowned but dismissed Sophie's outburst as nothing serious. With a mocking chuckle, she said, "What's wrong, Sophie? Still upset? We know you care about him, but let's be real. He'll never let go of someone as rich as you. Trust me, he'll be back within 2 weeks, and then it's up to you to handle him." As soon as Maria finished, Sophie looked up and glared at her. Her eyes were sharp, her voice cold. "Apologize." Maria froze, confused. "Apologize to him." Sophie repeated, her tone icy and firm. It was then Maria realized Sophie was genuinely pissed because of their comments about him. Still, Maria tried to brush it off. "Sophie, come on, why are you so worked up? We're not wrong, are we? He's just a poor guy who latched onto you for money. You didn't argue with us before when we said the same stuff." Maria's comment made Sophie freeze. The sharpness in her eyes faded, replaced by confusion. They had said things like this about Noah before, and she had let it slide every time. She searched her memories for times she might have defended him, only to realize Maria was right. And this wasn't the first time her friends had belittled Noah. Whether he was there or not, or present, but couldn't understand their French, Sophie had always stayed silent. Only when they mocked him directly in front of him did she occasionally speak up. But those objections were half-hearted, more for show than a real defense. That realization hit her hard. Her quiet acceptance of their comments mirrored her true feelings at the time. Her chest tightened and she found herself speechless. Instead, she reached for another drink and started downing glass after glass. Yet amidst her guilt and regret, a flicker of hope surfaced. Noah had a gambling father and a sick mother. Now he was unemployed. Maybe given time, he'd really come back to her. Meanwhile, her friends changed the topic. "Did you hear about Thompson Group? They just appointed a new CEO. One of them said, "I heard it's the Wang family's eldest son." Another added, "Apparently he's been away for years, training himself. Now that he's back, they handed him the company right away. Well, he's their only heir. Makes sense that everything would go to him eventually. Even if he parachuted into the role, he's probably been groomed for this all his life. Honestly, it's wild how some people are born into such privilege. Even with the same last name, the differences between people can be staggering." Sophie wasn't interested in the conversation and stayed silent, lost in her thoughts as the number of empty bottles in front of her grew. She didn't pay attention to the mention of the Thompson family's eldest son returning after years away. Nor did she realize that Noah's departure and the note he left her were not just out of anger, but the truth. By the time the gathering ended, it was late at night. Sophie had drunk so much she could barely stand. Worried about her safety, Maria called Daniel to pick her up. When Daniel arrived, only Maria was left with Sophie, who was slumped over and barely conscious. Maria handed Sophie over to him with a teasing smile. "Take good care of her, bro-in-law. Make sure she gets home safe." She gave him a knowing look before grabbing her car keys and leaving Daniel alone with an intoxicated Sophie. Instead of taking her to the Christopher family villa, Daniel brought her to his own place. Once inside, he carried her into the bedroom and gently placed her on the soft bed. He carefully wiped her face and tucked her in before lying down beside her. "Sophie," he whispered, "we're getting married anyway. What's the harm in moving things forward a bit?" He leaned closer to her, but just as the tension in the room seemed to peak, Sophie stirred, pressing herself against him. Her head nestled into the crook of his neck, her warm breath brushing his skin and sending shivers down his spine. The room's atmosphere grew heavier, charged with intimate heat, but the name that escaped her lips the next moment froze him in place. "Noah," she murmured, her voice soft but clear. She didn't make any further moves, only clung to him tightly, as if afraid that if she let go, the person she truly wanted would disappear forever. Daniel's expression darkened. He lay still, holding her, his mind racing. His eyes flashed with a venomous glint. Noah, always Noah. If only Noah would disappear from this world for good. Sophie woke up with a pounding headache, instinctively raising her hand to massage her temples. But the moment she realized there was someone else beside her, her hand froze mid-air. Turning her head, she saw a head of brown dyed hair and, without thinking, blurted out, "Noah." The moment the name left her lips, she knew something was wrong. Noah was still in City A, and he had ended things so decisively just days ago. There was no way he would be lying next to her now, let alone with dyed hair, something he had never done. A sense of dread crept over her as she pushed the person beside her with sudden force. The man, startled awake, tumbled off the bed with a loud thud. Daniel groaned as he hit the floor, rubbing his side before looking up to see Sophie glaring at him with an icy expression. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was cold, devoid of any warmth, making Daniel's face flush with both embarrassment and frustration. If it had been someone else looking at him with such disdain, he might have elicited pity with his pitiful expression. Even the old Sophie, before her breakup with Noah, might have softened. But the Sophie standing before him now had heard every word of his taunts to Noah. Seeing that Sophie remained unmoved, her expression growing darker, Daniel suppressed his irritation and quickly explained, "You were drunk last night. You wouldn't let me take you back to your villa, so I had no choice but to bring you to mine." It was only then that Sophie noticed her surroundings. She had been so consumed by anger earlier that she hadn't realized she wasn't in her own bedroom. Her expression softened slightly, but the suspicion in her eyes didn't fade. "Then why were you sleeping next to me?" Daniel's face flushed deeper. He stammered, I planned to leave after settling you in, but you wouldn't let go of me." His hesitant demeanor and words made Sophie's eyes darken further. Whether or not she believed him, she didn't say. She simply stood, giving him a cold, pointed look before walking out of the room. Pausing at the door, she bit her lip and said, "Daniel, stop playing games. The only reason we're getting married is because you're obedient and easy for my parents to handle. If you try this again, I won't hesitate to replace you." Daniel's face twisted with anger as he watched her leave. His jaw clenched so tightly it was a wonder he didn't crack a tooth. Meanwhile, in City A, he glanced at yet another unknown number flashing on his phone screen. For the first time, he found himself likening Sophie to a relentless leech that refused to let go. After he had blocked her number, there had been blessed silence for a while. But recently, for reasons he couldn't understand, she had started calling him from different numbers. Each time he blocked one, another would pop up in its place. He sighed in frustration as he disconnected and blocked yet another number. Finally, the nonstop ringing stopped, and he exhaled slowly. He placed his phone face down on the desk, put it on silent, and turned his attention back to the documents in front of him. This project was the first major task he had taken on since joining Thompson Group. If he could successfully secure it, it would solidify his position among the company's upper management. He had accepted the challenge without hesitation, only to find out later that Sophie had unexpectedly joined the bidding process. He wasn't afraid to face her directly, but he couldn't understand her motives. The Lee family's strength was in City B. Why would Sophie suddenly interfere in a project in City A? Was it because of him? The thought made him chuckle darkly. Did Sophie think this was some grand romantic gesture, balancing wedding plans with one guy while clinging to another? As if juggling two lives was perfectly justified. And yet, she had the nerve to tell me that things between her and Daniel weren't what I thought. But even if she didn't love Daniel, what did it matter? Daniel was her choice. She had agreed to the engagement herself. Whether he was the heir to the wealthiest family or just an ordinary guy, she had no right to turn him from her legitimate boyfriend into her secret lover. The bidding competition this time was intense. It wasn't just one group participating. Nearly all the top-tier conglomerates in City A were involved. It wasn't unusual for competitors from other cities like Sophie to join as well. Given the scale, the organizers decided to host a banquet, inviting all participating companies to attend. When his aunt handed him the invitation, she gave him a sly wink. Her expression left him confused. "Auntie, is there something else I should know?" he asked. She rolled her eyes at him. Seeing that he genuinely seemed to have forgotten about the matter she'd mentioned earlier, she patted his shoulder and said, "Don't tell me you've forgotten. I told you about my friend's daughter and suggested you meet her. She's been busy, but guess what? She's also attending this banquet for the bidding. Perfect timing for you two to meet." Hearing it was about matchmaking again, he was momentarily speechless. Given the setting, he couldn't help but laugh awkwardly. "Auntie," he said, "this is a bidding event. That makes us competitors. Who arranges a blind date between competitors during a bidding event? You're really one of a kind." He even gave her a playful thumbs up. But his aunt wasn't the least bit concerned. "So what?" she replied. "Being opponents in business doesn't mean you can't connect personally. Besides, if you meet her first, maybe you can use a bit of charm to your advantage. I've heard that while she's never dated anyone, she once had a crush on someone. Guess what? He's your type." He froze for a moment. It reminded him of the last time he checked the contacts she shared with him. He had found out that the girl and he were already friends online. But because there was no need to send a friend request, he had completely forgotten about her afterward and never reached out. Now his aunt's reminder brought her back to his mind. "She likes someone like me, and she's already added me as a friend. Was that why she added me in the first place?" He frowned slightly, and his impression of her dropped a notch. It seemed less like she wasn't interested in finding a boyfriend and more like she couldn't let go of the person she once liked. Wouldn't meeting her now feel like volunteering to be someone's stand-in? He didn't mention his doubts to his aunt, who had no idea about the history. Instead, he gave her a perfunctory smile, accepted the invitation, and felt indifferent about the meeting. He thought his silence would be taken as a polite refusal, but his aunt must have interpreted it as consent. On the day of the bidding, she sent a car to wait outside the Wang family villa. "Hello, Mr. Wang." The woman was dressed in an elegant Chanel suit and approached him as he stepped out. He stopped in front of her, not taking another step forward. "I don't think I've asked for your name," he said. She hesitated, her eyes dropping for a moment as if to hide a flicker of disappointment. After a brief pause, she replied, "Ethan. My last name is Carlson." Satisfied with her answer, he didn't prolong the awkwardness. When she gestured toward the car, he followed her and got into the passenger seat. Once inside, he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery outside the window. Yet her name lingered in his mind, repeating itself over and over. There was something oddly familiar about it, though he couldn't place why. He stole a glance at her, noticing how focused she was on driving. She seemed like she wanted to say something but hesitated. After a moment of indecision, she stayed quiet, and so did he. Before long, they arrived at the banquet hall. They stepped out of the car, and he began walking toward the entrance, assuming she would follow. But when he glanced back, he saw her standing still with a dazed expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. She pressed her lips together, then met his gaze and said, "Most people walk in arm with their dates." For some reason, even though Ethan's face remained neutral, he thought he caught a trace of disappointment in her expression. He cleared his throat, trying to ease the awkwardness, and walked back to her, taking her arm gently. He led her toward the banquet hall. As they neared the entrance, curiosity got the better of him, and he asked, "Have we met before?" The flicker of sadness in Ethan's eyes deepened. He doesn't remember me at all, she thought. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer, but finally, she broke the silence. "We were classmates in high school," she said softly. "I was the one who always sat in the corner." Her words carried a quiet weight, drawing him into a past he had almost forgotten. Back in high school, Ethan had been the reserved one, always keeping to herself. Her classmates rarely noticed her, and even her parents, often busy with their careers, paid little attention to her. Living in her own world, Ethan rarely interacted with others. Despite her striking appearance, she was easily overlooked, just as he had overlooked her until now. But Ethan had noticed him. She liked him from the moment he approached her differently than others. While most classmates barely acknowledged her presence, he made a point to include her, never skipping her during group discussions or activities. He had become the most frequent figure in her otherwise isolated world, the only light in her life, but her shyness held her back. At graduation, she managed only to add him as a friend through their shared classmate directory, despite wanting to talk to him. she never sent a single message. Years later, while studying abroad and undergoing therapy, she learned through mutual acquaintances that he was in a relationship. Heartbroken, she decided she would remain a silent observer in his life, content as long as he was happy. But when she heard about his breakup, hope rekindled within her. And so, she returned. Hearing Ethan's explanation, fragments of memory resurfaced. He recalled the quiet girl who always sat at the edge of the classroom. Yet looking at her now, poised and composed at such a high-profile event, he found it hard to reconcile the girl she had been with the woman she had become. "You've changed a lot," he said, unable to hide his surprise. "You're even more beautiful now." Her cheeks turned red, and she averted her eyes shyly. The banquet hall buzzed with energy. People milled about, chatting and networking. They had just stepped inside when the sound of hurried footsteps behind them caught his attention. He turned instinctively, only to lock eyes with two figures entering the hall. "Noah!" The simultaneous exclamation drew the attention of everyone in the room. Ito, Daniel, and Sophie. Their dramatic entrance left him frowning. Despite being from two of City B's most prominent families, their lack of decorum was glaring. How could they act so unsophisticated at such a formal event? Unwilling to engage, he turned back to Ethan. Taking her hand firmly, he quickened his pace, guiding her deeper into the crowd and away from the pair at the entrance. Sophie froze at first, shocked to see him at the banquet hall, especially holding another woman's hand. Her surprise quickly turned to anger, overriding any sense of composure. Ignoring Daniel, who was right beside her, she hurried to catch up with them. "Noah, who's she? Why are you with her?" she demanded, her voice sharp and confrontational. Daniel caught up moments later, his expression turning into a sneer as he looked between Ethan and him, his gaze lingering on their intertwined hands. "Isn't it obvious?" Daniel said with a mocking chuckle. "He must have latched onto someone new after breaking up with you. How else could he get into a place like this? Someone like him could never afford to be here on his own." His tone was so smug, so self-assured, that he didn't even notice Sophie's expression darkening further, nor the uncomfortable looks other attendees were giving them. Thompson Group was the wealthiest family in City A. As the heir to the Thompson fortune, he didn't need anyone's connections to attend this event. Anyone who understood even the basics of the business world would have realized that. Yet here stood Daniel, obliviously spouting nonsense, while Sophie's expression began to crack under the weight of embarrassment. No one in the crowd felt the need to correct them. The spectacle was too entertaining to interrupt. Ethan, however, wasn't amused. She stepped forward, her expression cold, and grabbed Sophie's wrist with a firm grip. "Let go," Ethan said, her voice sharp and devoid of emotion. Sophie winced at the sudden pressure on her wrist and looked at Ethan in shock. Caught off guard, she nearly cried out in pain but stubbornly refused to release her grip on his hand. Seeing Sophie's discomfort, Daniel's protective instincts kicked in. He jabbed a finger toward Ethan. "Do you know who we are? How dare you lay a hand on us? Do you want to regret this for the rest of your life?" Though Sophie didn't say anything, the flash of dark satisfaction in her eyes, coupled with her refusal to stop Daniel's tirade, made it clear she agreed with him. He let out a dry chuckle, signaling Ethan to release Sophie's wrist. Ethan hesitated but let go when he nodded reassuringly. Sophie's tense expression relaxed slightly, and Daniel smirked, mistaking their restraint for fear. He opened his mouth, likely to continue his tirade, but before he could get a word out, he pulled off the brooch pin from his jacket and jabbed it into Sophie's hand without hesitation. Sophie stared at him, unflinching, convinced he wouldn't dare hurt her. After all, she believed he still loved her too much to follow through. "Noah, I know," she began, but her words were cut off by a sharp gasp of pain as the brooch pierced her skin. Her grip on his hand weakened, and he pulled away easily. Daniel, seeing Sophie hurt, lunged at him in a rage. He sidestepped Daniel's swing and with a swift motion, landed a solid punch on his nose. Blood poured from Daniel's nose as he staggered back, clutching his face in disbelief. "Noah!" he screamed, his voice filled with anger and humiliation. In stark contrast to his outburst, he remained calm, brushing off the confrontation as if it were nothing. He handed Ethan a tissue for her hands, then casually picked up another to wipe his own wrist. His gaze shifted to Daniel, cool and disdainful. "Do you really think you're someone important?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. Sophie's face flushed with humiliation, her anger simmering just below the surface. But before she could respond, he added, "You two came here to bid, yet you don't even know who your competitors are. What a pair of fools. Competitors." Sophie and Daniel exchanged uncertain glances. Their minds raced as they recalled the bidding documents they had reviewed earlier. Recognition dawned as they matched Ethan's face with the profile of the Liu family's second daughter, one of City A's most prominent families. Compared to the Wang and Liu families, even the esteemed Ito and Li families were insignificant. For the first time that evening, Ethan broke her silence. Her voice was calm, yet commanding as she addressed Daniel. Instead of asking if he knew who she was, she said coolly, "Perhaps you should first ask the person beside you who we are." The word "we" froze both Sophie and Daniel in their tracks. Did she mean not just her, but him as well? Was he also here as a competitor in the bidding? The realization hit them like a brick. Among the attendees, the only identity that fit was Thompson Group's heir, City A's wealthiest family. Sophie and Daniel's faces turned deathly pale. Looking around, they saw the amused expressions on the other attendees. In that moment, it became clear who the real spectacle was. Sophie's face flushed alternately red and green, unable to bear the humiliation. She ignored the reason they were here in the first place and fled the banquet hall in disarray. Daniel shot him one last venomous glare before rushing after her. He caught his look of resentment but dismissed it with indifference. Daniel's animosity toward him was nothing new. His confidence rested solely on the support of the Ito family and his shaky engagement to Sophie. But Sophie had proven herself willing to choose someone else when the benefits outweighed her attachment. When Daniel could no longer offer her what she needed, she'd ditch him without hesitation. As for the Ito family, they'd be the first to abandon him if they discovered he had offended Thompson Group. He wouldn't even need to lift a finger, but for now, his focus was on the bidding. The organizers took the stage shortly after the drama subsided. They barely glanced at the retreating figures of Sophie and Daniel, mentally crossing their names off the list. The competition was intense, but in the end, he successfully secured the project. On the drive home, Ethan was once again behind the wheel. This time, it was she who broke the silence. "Do you still like her?" she asked abruptly. Her question caught him off guard, and it took a moment to realize she was referring to Sophie. His expression turned incredulous. "Where'd you get that idea?" he asked. "I thought you agreed to this blind date because you knew she'd be here and wanted to make her jealous," Ethan admitted. Her assumption made sense, given his initial indifference toward her. Though he had treated Sophie harshly at the banquet, the thought lingered in her mind. If he didn't care for her, why'd he agree to the date in the first place? He sighed. "My aunt suggested it, so I came to check it out. But I'm not the type to carry feelings for one person while pursuing another. Loyalty is something I value in a partner, so I hold myself to the same standard." Perhaps the events of the evening had eased the tension between them, or maybe it was her genuine curiosity. But he found himself patiently explaining his stance. They chatted casually for the rest of the ride. Before long, the car pulled up in front of the Wang family villa. He waved a quick goodbye and headed toward the entrance. But as he approached the door, he paused, noticing that her car hadn't driven away. It sat idling in place. Curious, he walked back to her. She lowered the window as he approached, her eyes wide with mild confusion. "Mr. Thompson, is there something else?" she asked. He smiled. "We're old classmates. No need to be so formal. Call me Noah." He paused before adding, "Also, I only agreed to this date because of my aunt. I'm not looking to start a new relationship right now. Let's just stay friends for the time being." Her expression softened, and he gave her a friendly wave. "Drive safe on your way home." As he turned and walked through the villa gates, her car remained parked for a moment longer. Watching his retreating figure, Ethan's lips curved into a faint, genuine smile. Ethan had waited for years, so she didn't mind waiting a little longer. As he said, they would stay friends for now. And besides, moving from strangers to friends was already enough to make her content. That night, unlike two sleepless people in City B, both Ethan and he slept soundly. The next morning, he was awakened by the incessant ringing of his phone, groggy and half awake. He glanced at the screen and found that his social media accounts were being bombarded with notifications. The endless chimes drew his attention to malicious comments full of vile insults and accusations. Just then, a call came in from a City B number. It was David, an old friend from his time in City B. "Noah," he exclaimed, his voice brimming with indignation. "Have you seen the stuff online? These people just blindly believe whatever they hear. They're even accusing you, the heir to the richest family, of meddling in someone else's relationship. You have to clear this up. Make sure those slandering you face the consequences." His words came out in a torrent, and his heavy breathing reflected his fury and frustration. Thanks to his explanation, he finally understood what had happened. Apparently, after Daniel returned to City B, he still couldn't get over the humiliation he suffered at the banquet. Relying on his engagement with Sophie, he twisted the truth and claimed that he had interfered in their relationship. To make matters worse, he released evidence of Sophie and him living together after their engagement. Initially, the netizens didn't believe that someone like him, a scion of wealth, would interfere in another's relationship. But Daniel's so-called evidence, combined with testimonies from Sophie's so-called friends, fueled the rumors. The scandal exploded overnight. His social media was inundated with abusive comments. "You're filthy rich, but didn't anyone teach you morals? Breaking up families is disgusting. Rich heir or not, you're shameless and immoral. Boycott Noah. Boycott Thompson Group." Among the storm of insults were some who hurled vile and obscene remarks, while others, more rational, called for patience in his response. Unfortunately, the latter were drowned out by the majority. He spoke calmly into the phone. "I'll take care of it. Don't forget, I'm the heir to the wealthiest family. Thompson Group's legal team isn't just for show. If he dares spread lies, he must be ready for the consequences." Hearing the confidence in his voice, David finally sighed in relief. After offering a few words of encouragement, he hung up. Once the call ended, he returned to the internet to gauge the extent of the uproar. As he scrolled through the flood of malicious comments, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of anger. Back then, they had looked down on him, convinced he was unworthy of honor because they thought he was poor. But now, even with his identity as the heir to the wealthiest family known to the public, where did they get the audacity to collude with Daniel to slander him? His expression darkened as he methodically captured screenshots of all the defamatory posts. Just then, his phone rang again. This time, it was another unfamiliar number. After a brief hesitation, he answered. "Noah?" came a familiar voice, calm and reassuring. "Are you okay? Don't let what's online get to you. I know you didn't do any of those things, and you shouldn't be upset over baseless accusations. I believe my parents are already dealing with this, but if there's anything I can help with, please don't hesitate to let me know." Hearing the gentle urgency in Ethan's voice, he felt the frustration in his chest dissolve. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he replied, "It's all right. I'm not that fragile. It's just a rumor. I can handle it myself." "Okay," she responded softly, noticing that his tone was light-hearted. Ethan seemed to relax. Yet, she lingered on the call, hesitant to hang up but unsure of what more to say. Silence enveloped them, the quiet so profound that he could almost hear her steady, shallow breathing through the line. Eventually, he broke the stillness. "Ethan, thank you," he said sincerely, though the rumors didn't truly faze him. Her concern touched him deeply. He kept that last thought to himself before quickly ending the call. On her end, Ethan stared at the now silent phone, feeling as though time had passed too quickly. When his parents first learned about the online abuse he was receiving, they were furious, nearly ready to personally confront Sophie, Daniel, and their meddlesome friends. His father was livid. A shameless man and a treacherous woman. They don't know their place, throwing dirt on my son's name. Truly ignorant fools daring to provoke the Thompson family. His mother wasn't far behind, rolling her eyes dramatically. Ignorant fools. More like downright animals. How dare they? It took some effort to calm them down, and seeing their fiery indignation left him both amused and exasperated. "Relax, Mom, Dad," he said with a grin. "Trust me, I won't let them get away with it. They spread lies, so they'll have to pay the price for it." Meanwhile, in City B at the Ito family estate, Sophie sat with a dark cloud over her face. Her gaze bore into Daniel, who sat sobbing uncontrollably before her, his pitiful appearance only fueling her irritation. Her voice was sharp and scornful. "How many times have I told you to keep your schemes in check? I thought you might still have some use, but you've got some nerve. Roping in Maria and the others to smear Noah. Do you know what a mess you've made?" Daniel shook his head frantically, his tears streaming, but it did nothing to stir her sympathy. "Sophie," Daniel stammered, "Noah is nothing but a fraud. He lied to you for 5 years, pretending to be poor when he's the heir to the Thompson fortune. And now that we've crossed him, do you really think he'll let us off easily instead of waiting for him to retaliate? Why not join forces and bring Thompson Group to its knees?" His words caused a flicker of thought to cross Sophie's face, her expression softening slightly. Yes, Noah had deceived you for 5 years, pretending to be someone he wasn't. If you had known his true identity, you wouldn't have needed to agree to any arranged marriage. You accepted him despite the fake identity he concocted and kept him close. And what did he do in return? He used the first opportunity to cut ties, leaving you to face humiliation and loss. Why should you protect his lofty reputation? Let him fall. Once he hits rock bottom, wouldn't he come crawling back to you? After all, he'd already discarded everything you had shared, burning and throwing away all traces of your past. If you stick to your story and paint him as a scoundrel, wouldn't the world believe it? He'd be left with no choice but to live under the label of a cheater while his fortune crumbled. Sophie's gaze shifted back to Daniel. This time there was a hint of approval in her eyes. "Then you'd better work harder," she said coldly. "Make sure you drag him down from his position as the richest heir." With that, she turned on her heels and left Daniel's villa without looking back. The hum of the departing car faded into the distance, leaving Daniel standing in his villa, his eyes filled with venomous resentment. He hadn't acted on impulse when he schemed against him. Ever since returning from a city and failing miserably at the bidding event, where he not only lost the project but also offended him, the Ito family had decisively abandoned him. Daniel had hoped to solidify his position in the Ito family through his engagement to Sophie. Yet when he brought it up to Ito's patriarch and matriarch, they didn't even hesitate before slapping him across the face. "You still dare mention your engagement to Sophie? She came to us today to annul it herself. You couldn't even hold on to her. Tell us, Daniel, what use do you have now?" They sneered. For the first time, Daniel realized he had been cast aside by everyone. But why? He thought bitterly. "Noah, it's because of you, because of you. The Ito family gave up on me, and Sophie despises me. How dare you still stand above me?" Looking down with disdain, consumed by anger, Daniel redirected all his fury toward him. With Maria and Sophie as his accomplices, he decided to make a desperate last-ditch effort. They had assumed that he had erased all traces of his 5 years with Sophie. Even if he presented evidence of their relationship, they thought they could fabricate something older to counter it. But they hadn't accounted for the 2 surveillance videos and chat logs he had kept as his trump card. The first video captured their conversation in French, which took place just a month ago, right in front of him. Although the audio was slightly distorted due to being recorded from a distance, the content was crystal clear. Sophie had secretly gotten engaged to someone else while planning to keep him around as her lover under the guise of love. The second video was footage of his confrontation with Daniel outside the restroom at the banquet. The audio revealed him stating clearly that he had been in a relationship with Sophie for 5 years before Daniel came into the picture. Even as he labeled him the interloper, Daniel's response was nothing more than impotent rage. He never once denied it. If he were truly the one who had interfered in their relationship, given Daniel's personality, he would have refuted him right there. To make matters worse for him, the chat logs he released contained Daniel's boastful and antagonistic messages directed at him. These included taunts about his victory and Sophie's supposed allegiance to him, behavior unbecoming of someone who claimed to be a victim of infidelity. The narrative flipped overnight. The same netizens who had mercilessly vilified him now turned their venom towards Sophie and Daniel, as the so-called righteous defenders of justice flooded their profiles with vitriol. He took the matter a step further. He filed a lawsuit against every individual who had slandered him online and gained significant traction with their comments. This included netizens who had jumped on the bandwagon, as well as Maria and Sophie's other so-called friends. He handed the case over to Thompson Group's legal team, confident in their ability to follow through. When he logged back into his social media, the comments section was finally peaceful. Any remaining dissenters were swiftly muted. Those who attempted to resume their vitriol after their bans were lifted were met with court summons appearing in their inboxes. At last, they quieted down for good. To address the supportive messages he had received, he posted a tweet to express his stance. The law is clear, and justice prevails. Only those with guilty consciences fear rumors. As for me, I will wield the law to defend my rights. Daniel was completely abandoned. He didn't focus much on the aftermath. He trusted that the legal team would ensure they paid for their actions. However, when he heard that Daniel had to represent himself in court without even a lawyer to defend him, he couldn't help but feel a little pity. Honestly, if Daniel had stayed out of his way, he could have kept up the appearance of a perfect marriage with Sophie, just another ordinary wealthy couple. But Daniel was never satisfied. While he was still close to Sophie, Daniel wanted to push him out. Once he left, Daniel blamed him for everything he'd suffered and tried to step all over him. In the end, this was his fate. Even Sophie's sisters, led by Maria, who always believed that birthright determined everything, eventually had no choice but to side with Daniel. They too were dragged into the lawsuit. It was all unnecessary. On the other hand, Sophie, the central figure of all this, had never spoken out publicly. By choosing silence, she managed to distance herself from the entire affair. When the legal team representative came to see him with the final verdict, he reported that due to the severity of the case, those involved, despite continuing to shout their innocence in court, were all sentenced to 2 years in prison due to their poor attitude and his refusal to settle. Netizens later commented that it was incredibly rare to see a group of rich heirs crying as they were locked away in prison. And perhaps this would be the only time in their lives they'd witness something like that. After hearing about their sentences, he didn't follow up with the case. What surprised him, however, was that Sophie came to see him once again. At that moment, he was discussing dinner plans with Ethan. When the phone on the front desk rang, the receptionist said, "Mr. Thompson, Miss Christopher says she'd like to meet with you." He paused, looking over at Ethan, who had, in just a month, brought down the Christopher Group, and hesitated for a moment before agreeing. He was curious why Sophie would seek him out now, after everything had completely soured between them. He had imagined Sophie might be struggling, but when he saw her, he was taken aback. It had only been a few months, but he barely recognized her. The woman sitting in front of him, frail, worn out, and looking at least 10 years older, was the same Sophie who had once been so radiant and full of life. He was shocked for only a moment before quickly regaining his composure and adopting the same cold, distant demeanor he always kept in front of her. Sophie, clearly surprised to see Ethan sitting beside him, seemed to lose her breath for a moment. But she quickly regained her composure, knowing that she had no leverage in front of him anymore. With a face full of regret, she sought his last bit of mercy. "Noah, I know I wronged you before, but I never lied to you. I've always loved only you. Please, for the sake of our past, let go of Christopher Group." She lowered herself completely. The arrogance she had once subtly displayed when they were together was now gone. She looked completely different, almost like a shadow of her former self. He spread his hands, shook his head, and then pointed to Ethan sitting beside him. I said, "The person who wanted to bring down Christopher Group is not me. Why don't you ask her?" He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Moreover, Sophie, haven't you already drained our past relationship when you secretly got engaged to someone else intending to keep me around as just a lover? When you and your sisters mocked and belittled me in French, you never even thought to stop them. When Daniel and your friends spread rumors about me, you quietly stood by, never intervening. Now you're talking about our past relationship. Why didn't you think about it back then when you were doing all these things?" As he spoke, Sophie's face turned pale, and at that moment, she felt the bitter taste in her throat, making it hard to even swallow. She said, "Noah, I know I was wrong, and I apologize. But if this continues, Christopher Group really won't be able to bear it." He shrugged indifferently. "What does it matter to me if Christopher Group can't bear it, Sophie? They've paid the price for their actions. Why do you think a light apology from you can pull you out of this mess?" She retorted, but he never did those things to her. She was desperate, trying to justify herself, but when she saw his smile vanish the moment he spoke, her words faltered. I said, "You didn't do those things. You were just a passive observer. Sophie, people like you, the bystanders, are the most despicable." He looked at her. "Because of your inaction, your friends treated me so horribly. Because of your silence, Daniel had the chance to hurt me over and over again. And now you're telling me you didn't do anything. Fine, you didn't do anything. I didn't bring down Christopher Group either. I can't help with Christopher Group's problems." He raised his voice. "Now please leave." He opened the office door and put on a perfectly official smile. "Please, go." She tried to say something, but he grabbed Ethan's hand and walked past her without a second glance. After all, he was the CEO. A little time off wasn't a problem. As for the person in the office, there were others watching her. "So everything would be fine?" he asked. "So where should we go for dinner? Western food or home-cooked meals?" "I've been craving home-cooked food lately," Ethan answered. "Let's go with home-cooked food. I'll leave it up to you." Her face softened. No longer the same quiet and reserved woman he had first met. He turned back and raised an eyebrow, asking, "Why do you always listen to me?" She suddenly stopped walking. When she looked at him, her gaze was so serious that his heart skipped a beat. He was about to change the subject and keep walking, when her voice came from behind, calling after him, "Because Noah, I like you." Her confession was sudden, yet in some ways he had already expected it. His steps froze and he turned to look at her. He sighed, about to speak, but the words of rejection didn't come. She said, "I know you've said that you're not ready for a new relationship, so when you are, can I be the first one you consider?" Her eyes shone like a galaxy, and as he looked into them, the rejection he had been preparing to say disappeared. He smiled and said, "Since you're asking so sincerely, I'll reluctantly agree." She smiled back, ignoring his teasing words, and simply followed her heart, embracing him. Ethan had waited through many lonely winters and summers, believing that next winter she would no longer be the only one feeling lonely.
Until my kid gets home from school. I haven't decided if I'm gonna keep streaming. It all depends on if he has homework or not. I don't know why I keep getting loaded into games that are already going on.
We've got mass casualties. We must stop our losses.
What are you playing right now, Isaac? Are you playing anything?
No, nothing neither.
So many of them. Is that dude up there?
Objective Alpha has been neutralized.
Be advised, troop numbers are critical. Okay, we've secured Alpha.